Imagine being humiliated in your greatest fragility, having nothing, and swearing in the bottom of your heart that it will change your destiny. Now imagine coming back years later, not like that boy without a future, but as the owner of the place that once despised you. What would you do if you had a chance to rewrite your story? Today you will find out how a certain soul has managed to turn pain into power. But before we start, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave in the comments from where you are watching. Now, get ready, because the story begins here. A humble young man was humiliated by seeking a job on a farm. Years later, he returned, and his revelation shocked everyone. Rejected and despised, the poor young man vowed to change his destiny. Years of struggle and effort turned him into the man he is today, but the memory of humiliation remained alive. Now he was back, and his secret was about to be revealed. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this. Leave your like in the video and comment from which city you are watching. The dark land exhaled a strong smell of newly hired coffee, mixing with the scent of the morning dew. The sun had not yet been born completely when Luke, barefoot, felt the coffee beans between his toes as he helped his mother, Donna Maria, to spread the grains over the target canvas in the yard. He was only 8 years old, but already understood the weight of work. "Mom, when I grow up, I will buy a bag of sugar just for us, and you will never need to ration the coffee again," he said, with a voice full of dreams. Donna Maria laughed softly, tired, but full of tenderness. "Ah, my son," she said, running her skipped hands on the flowered apron. "More important than coffee sugar is never missing the chest." She always said things like that, planting seeds of strength in her son's heart. But no strength could prepare Lucas for the day when his life would change forever. The sun punished the small village when a scream broke the silence of the fields. Lucas dropped the grain, filled cloth, and ran toward the sound, his heart hitting hard. Upon coming close, he saw the scene that would accompany him for the rest of his life. His father's strong body, Joseph, fallen between the foliage, a coffee bag facing the side, and a thin thread of blood mixing with the earth. "Dad!" the boy shouted, kneeling beside him, smelling sweat and iron in the air. Joseph was still breathing, but his eyes were already distant. He tried to say something, but only a whisper came out of his lips before his breathing stopped completely. The village was filled with mourning that night. The rain fell as if the sky also cried the loss of a good man. Donna Maria remained sitting on the doorway, the coffee cup forgotten in her hands. Lucas, not understanding the size of the tragedy, only clung to his mother's legs, feeling her warmth as her last protection. "He left, right, Mother?" he asked in a low voice, as if he didn't want the answer to arrive. Donna Maria took a deep breath, holding her tears. "It was, my son. But as long as we remember him, he never really leaves." The absence of the father turned each day into a fight. Joseph's money on the farm soon stopped entering, and the food began to miss the table. Donna Maria sewed at night, taking advantage of Lampion's weak light to mend the neighbors of the neighbors in exchange for some exchanged. Lucas, even child, felt the weight of responsibility accumulating on his shoulders. At school, colleagues talked about new and sweet toys they experienced in the sale of the city. Lucas just heard, pretending that he didn't care. One day the teacher handed a blank sheet and asked each student to draw something she dreamed of. Lucas stood there looking at the paper, not knowing what to do. His colleagues drew bikes, soccer balls, dolls, and he? What did you want? Without thinking too much, he took the pencil and started scribbling. When he finished, his leaf showed a loud and strong man with a wide smile and a bag of coffee on his back. The father. "He never wanted toys. I just wanted your family to be like before. But dreams do not bring money, and hunger does not expect." It was then that Donna Maria made the decision that hurt the most in her soul. "Lucas," her voice left broken that morning as she straightened her son's grass, "you are already a man, my son, and men need to make difficult choices." Lucas was only 14 years old, but he knew what that meant. He would not go back to school. I would no longer learn about the books I loved so much. Your future from there would be the work. I'm going to take care of us, Mum. I promise. With his clothes shaved and a bundle of cloth carrying a piece of bread and a handful of flour, Lucas left his house that morning, walking down the dirt roads in search of a farm that gave her work. Every gate that passed, every big house that saw in the distance, he repeated the same question. Do you need service? Anything I can do? The answers were always the same. We have no vacancy. It's very young. Come back another day. The sun punished his back, his hunger turned his stomach, but he didn't give up. I always walked a step ahead because I knew there was no other choice. Until, in the distance, he spotted the largest farm he had ever seen, the Sol farm. The imposing house large rose at the top of a hill, surrounded by coffee plantations. Lucas took a deep breath, ignoring the tiredness, and crossed the rusty iron gates. He went straight to the shed where workers gathered. He felt his suspicious looks at him, but did not go back. He approached a tall man dressed in white who seemed to command the place. Good morning, sir. I'm looking for work. I do whatever it takes. The man turned slowly, analyzing Lucas from head to toe. His gaze was cold, sharp. I work here. He laughed, shaking his head. Look at you, kid. Torn clothes, hungry face. Do you really think you have place for you here? Lucas felt his face burn, but not in shame, of impotence. I work well, sir. I can learn fast. The man stepped ahead, leaning over until his eyes were at the time of Luke's. People like you only serve to weed. Here there are only place for those who were born on top. The laughter echoed through the shed, accompanied by murmurs and mocking looks. Lucas felt a knot in his throat, but refused to cry there in front of them. With his fists clenched, he turned and left without looking back. The humiliation burned within it as fire. But that night, when he got home, he found his mother on the porch, as if he knew he would need comfort. She didn't have to say anything. He just handed him a cup of hot coffee and stroked his face. And at that moment, Lucas took an oath, not of revenge, but of transformation. The door of the wooden house grinded gently when Lucas entered, his shoulders fallen by the weight of humiliation. The familiar smell of newly set coffee filled his nostrils, but for the first time, that aroma did not bring her comfort. He felt dirty, small, crushed by the words of the farm manager, who still echoed in his mind. People as you only serve to weed. Her heart accelerated every time she remembered the workers' laughter, the manager's cruel look. He swallowed hard, wanting to erase that moment of memory, but the emotion stuck in the chest suffocated. Sitting on the porch, Donna Maria watched him in silence. He knew, even before he said a word, that something bad had happened. His son's eyes were red, not crying, but of a silent pain that only a mother can recognize. Come here, my son. His voice was soft but firm, like the wet earth after the rain. Lucas hesitated for a moment, so he walked to her, sat on the porch step and felt the warmth of his mother's hand to land on her head, messing her hair in a loving way, as he was when he was small. They laughed at me, mother. The voice came out hoarse, heavy. Donna Maria sighed, pulling him close. And what else? Lucas squeezed his fists on his knees. They said I will never be anything, that only rich people have a chance. The silence extended for a moment. The cup of coffee that Donna Maria was holding, a thin smoke, rising slowly, as if each particle danced before disappearing in the cold air of the night. Son, listen well. She turned to him, her brown eyes reflecting the weak light of the lamp. Life can take everything out of us, except honor and hope. Lucas felt a knot in his throat. I wanted to believe in those words, but the pain of humiliation was still recent, still burned like an open wound. But mother, what if they are right? What if I never leave here? Donna Maria held her son's face in the calloused hands and smiled sweetly, but with the same firmness as those who have faced storms without being folded. They are only right if you let them be. Silence spread between them, meaningful. Lucas lowered his head, taking a deep breath. At that moment, he took an oath, not of revenge, but of transformation. In the following days, Lucas tried to find work elsewhere, but always heard the same answers. Without experience, no study, no influential surname. His chances were minimal. The food at home began to rare. The flour that Donna Maria mixed with salt and salt to make a thin porridge was getting shrier and more scarce. Coffee, which was previously sweetened with sugar crumbs, became pure, bitter as the reality they lived. It was a silent night when the wind shook the fine curtains of the house, which Lucas realized that he had no choice. He needed to leave. The big city was scary, but it was also the only chance it had. The next morning, he found Donna Maria in the kitchen, stirring an iron pan already spent over time. The smell of bitter coffee spread throughout the air. "Mother," her voice came out hesitant, "I'm going to town." The movement of the wooden spoon stopped for a second. Donna Maria didn't look at him immediately, just took a deep breath and kept stirring the porridge. "I knew this day was going to come." She finally turned to him, her gaze loaded with conflicting feelings: pride, fear, sadness. "You are already a man, my son, and men make difficult choices." Those were the same words she had said when he had to leave school. Now they looked even heavier. "How are we going to do without you here?" Her voice was soft, but behind the words there was a silent request for him to stay. Lucas swallowed dry. "Aunt Joanna can help you. I'll send money as soon as you can." Donna Maria smiled, but her eyes shone with contained tears. "I know it's going, my son." On the day of the match, Lucas put on his best clothes, which was still beaten and neat, and tied a muggle with his few possessions: a dry bread, a small notebook where he wrote loose thoughts, and the only picture he had from his father. Donna Maria accompanied him to the bus stop at the entrance of the village. The wind shook the leaves of the trees, and the sky tinged with orange tones by the born sun. "You know you can always go back, right?" Her voice was low, trying to hold on the emotion. Lucas smiled but felt a tightness in his chest. "I'm going back, Mother, but only when I can give you a better life." The bus arrived, releasing a cloud of dust on the dirt road. Lucas climbed the steps, holding the door bar firmly. He looked back one last time. Donna Maria was there, small in the face of the immensity of the road, with the flowery apron and hands intertwined in front of the body. When the bus started moving, she slowly waved. It was at that moment that Lucas realized how much it hurt. It was at that moment that Donna Maria realized how much she hurt. The bus crossed roads and bridges until finally reaching the first tall buildings of the city. Lucas felt his stomach roll up to see the amount of cars, the lights flashing, the hasty people crossing streets without even looking at each other. The smell was different. There was no toasted coffee in the air, no wet earth. There was smoke, gasoline, the smell of fried food from some corner restaurant. He got out of the bus, holding his muggle tightly. There, in that immense and unknown place, he was no one. But he knew one thing. Even if he had to start from scratch, even if the whole world laughed at his face, he would win, not for revenge, but by transformation. The big city swallows Lucas as a silent and indifferent beast. He walked the streets, feeling small between the tall buildings, the incessant horns and the people who moved fast, not noticing their presence. He held the muggle tightly, as if it were the only connection with his old life. Her heart was beating hard, the mixture of fear and determination pulsating inside it. The first night was difficult. No money for a room. He slept leaning against the cold wall of a bus station, hugging his own knees to protect himself from the cold. The stomach snored, but he ignored it. I had no time for weakness. The next morning, the sun was stillborn when he began the search for work. It went from door to door, asking in bakeries, grocery stores, markets. "We are not hiring. Do you have experience?" "There is no age for that, boy." The negatives accumulated, each of them a blow to their trust. But Lucas didn't give up. He couldn't. It was in the late afternoon, when I was already hurting and hope began to weak, who found a small mechanical workshop on a neighborhood street. The plate at the entrance was worn, the letters slightly erased. "So Antonio's workshop. Repairs in general." Lucas stopped at the door, watching the movement inside. The smell of grease and burnt oil invaded its nostrils. Tools were scattered across the work counter, and a gently grey hair and a slightly protruding belly was under the hood of a car. Lucas took a deep breath and entered. "Good afternoon, Lord. Do you need assistant?" "I do anything." The mechanic raised his head, wrapping a dirty grease cloth on his sweaty forehead. His gaze found Lucas's, and for a moment he said nothing. "Anything, huh?" His voice was hoarse, loaded with years of heavy work. "Yes, sir. I learn fast." The man crossed his arms and analyzed Lucas for a moment, as if he tried to see beyond the lean appearance and his clothes. "Well, boy, start sweeping this floor." Lucas took the broom without hesitation, an relieved smile appearing on his face. It was a beginning. The first days in the workshop were of pure effort. Lucas did everything. He swept, washed pieces, organized tools. He never complained, even when his hands began to crack over the contact with oil and grease. His Antonio watched in silence, realized how the boy was different, how his determination did not hesitate. One day, while organizing screwdrivers on a shelf, Lucas heard the mechanic's voice behind him. "Come here, kid." Lucas approached, cleaning his hands on his old shirt. "Yes, sir." The man pointed to a dismantled engine on the bench. "Do you know what this is?" Lucas analyzed the scattered pieces. "I knew it was an engine, but I didn't understand how right it worked." His Antonio smiled in his corner, shaking his head. "Then pay attention. I'll teach you." And so it started. Lucas began to learn not only about mechanics, but about patience, about technique, about the accuracy of the movements. The old mechanic was not the type who spoke a lot, but when he spoke, his words carried weight. "You remind me of my own 40 years, he said once, as he adjusted a carburetor. Lucas felt a warmth in his chest. For the first time, someone saw something in him beyond poverty, beyond need. He wanted to learn more, and I wanted to be the best. Lucas's confidence grew every day. She was safer with the tools. She was beginning to understand engines as if they were living organisms, but the hurry was sometimes his enemy. One afternoon, while his Antonio served a client, Lucas decided to advance a simple service: change a car's piece of a car. He followed what he remembered the instructions, squeezed screws, adjusted hoses, and then turned on the car. The engine snapped, and suddenly smoke began to leave under the hood. The noise made its Antonio turn immediately. "What did you do, boy?" Lucas, frozen, tried to explain, but the serious expression of the mechanic made him lower his head. The customer looked worried. The old mechanic opened the hood, evaluated quickly, and cited. "You reversed the battery connectors." Lucas felt his face burn with shame. "I'm sorry, sir." His Antonio was silent for a moment, then patted the boy's shoulder. "Missing is part, kid. But next time, it calls me before moving something you don't master yet." Lucas nodded, determined to never make that mistake again. After that day, Lucas became even more careful. He observed every detail, absorbed each teaching. His effort did not go unnoticed. "Let's see if you've learned something," your Antonio said an afternoon, throwing a pair of gloves to Lucas. "Change the clutch of this car here." Luke's heart accelerated. That was not a small task. It was proof that the old mechanic trusted him. With shaking hands at first, he dismantled the pieces, analyzed each fit, and with patience did the work correctly. When he finished, his Antonio gave a corner smile. "Good job, boy." It was the first time Lucas felt he was on the right track. One night, when closing the workshop, Lucas sat on the sidewalk, exhausted but pleased. The cold breeze of the city made his sweaty body shiver. That's when he felt a touch on his shoulder. He was a street boy with even more spent clothes than his. "This is for you," said the boy, extending a wrinkled envelope. Luke took the letter, and his heart accelerated by recognizing the trembling handwriting. It was from his mother. With his fingers anxious, he opened the envelope and read the words written carefully. "My son, I hope this letter finds you well. The house is empty without you, but every day I am more like the man I know is becoming." The chickens continued to put it, And Aunt Joanna takes good care of me, but nothing replaces her laugh echoing the yard. Said, life can take everything from us, less honor and hope. I love you more than anything. Lucas squeezed the letter against his chest. The cold of the night no longer looked so intense. He was on the right track, and it wouldn't stop. Time passed as a well, lubricated engine spinning without pause, boosting Lucas forward. The boy who arrived at the workshop just to clean tools now had firm hands that dismantled and dating back engines with the accuracy of a surgeon. His previously scared gaze now carried confidence. Old Antonio watched everything in silence, like a master who sees his apprentice flourishing. But growing does not just mean learning. It means facing challenges that test every piece of who you are. And Lucas would still have many tests ahead. The day started early, smelling of grease and oil impregnating the workshop. Lucas spent hours leaning over engines, screws and cables, absorbing every detail as if his life depended on it. And in a way, it depended. But when the night fell and the workshop closed its doors, Lucas did not rest. He would take an old notebook, sit under the weak light of a pole, and studied. The books were borrowed from a small community library. Mathematics, physics, advanced mechanics. Everything that could help you better understand what you did during the day. He knew that learning only with his hands was not enough. I needed to understand what was behind each piece, each engine. Many nights, sleep weighed on his eyes, but he forced himself to continue. Because each page read was one more step towards the future that I wanted to build. And because every time he thought of giving up, he remembered the mother and the promise he had done. I'll give you a better life, mother. Cleave what it costs. His Antonio was not a man of many words, but Lucas knew that for him, respect was conquered with work. Then, the day the old mechanic handed him the responsibility of fixing a car alone, without supervision, Lucas knew that he had proved his value. "This is your chance," said Antonio, throwing the car key to him. "I want to see what I learned." Lucas took a deep breath. The engine of the vehicle was completely stopped, and the owner had already tried everything. But Lucas did not despair. He watched each piece, heard each sound, followed each track like a detective. And then, after hours of work, he found the problem. A small, loose thread that no one had noticed. When it turned the key and the engine mourned gently, his Antonio released a slight smile. "Good job, boy." Those 3 words meant more to Lucas than anything else. But Lucas didn't just want to be good. I wanted to be the best. Over time, he began to observe standards, common errors in engines, problems that looked simple but caused great flaws. So he had an idea. He created a preventive maintenance technique, something no one did there. It was a simple but revolutionary method. Review small components before they broke, ensuring that the engine would last longer. In the beginning, the other mechanics laughed. "This is a waste of time, kid. No one pays for prevention, just for repair." But Lucas didn't give up. Implemented the method in some cars that went through the workshop, and weeks later, customers returned, praising. The reputation of the workshop grew. Lucas's name began to be commented, and his Antonio, for the first time, looked at him with something that seemed proud. With the growth of the workshop, Lucas began to earn a better salary. Not much, but enough to send money to Donna Maria every month. In his letters, he told about the advances, about the customers who were asking him to fix his cars. "I am proud of you, my son." The mother's words, written with trembled letter, were like fuel for her tired soul. But Lucas wanted more. He knew he could go further. "I knew it was time to take the next step." One night, sitting next to his Antonio after a long day at work, Lucas spoke about his dream. "I want to open my own workshop, sir." The old mechanic was silent for a long moment, so he released a low laugh. "It took, huh, Lucas?" He frowned. "What?" Antonio looked at him with that wise look of those who have seen many things in life. "I knew this day was going. You have a head for it. But what about money?" Lucas took a deep breath. "I'll save money, work. In any case, I'll make it." Antonio nodded, catching his coffee mug. So promise me something. What? When you have your workshop, never forget where you came from. Never forget who taught you. Lucas smiled. This, I promise. From that day, Lucas worked more than ever. He saved every penny, took extra services, slept less. But each sacrifice was worth it, because he saw his future approaching piece by piece as an engine being assembled. And then, one day, the impossible happened. He found a small shed to rent. It wasn't big, it wasn't beautiful, but it was his. On the day of the inauguration, only one customer appeared, but Lucas knew it was just the beginning, because he had already won so many battles, and I wasn't going to stop now. The small shed of peeled walls and stained ground was bad, seemed to be a real workshop, but for Lucas, it was more than enough. He was looking at the facade without a license plate, the ranging iron gate when opening, to the empty space where a car could be fixed. There were no modern equipment, nor a line of customers waiting. But there was something much more important: hope. That first day, Lucas wiped the floor as if polishing a diamond. He organized his few tools with the same zeal as a jeweler preparing his jewelry. He was ready. Now only one thing was missing: customers. But no one appeared. The day passed slowly. Lucas sat on a stool at the entrance, watching the cars pass on the nearby avenue. Everyone went on, without even noticing their workshop. The night fell, and he closed the doors without moving in a single engine. Maybe I dreamed too loud, thought came fast. Cruel. But before he could surrender to his discouragement, he took the pencil and wrote a letter to his mother. Mum, today I opened my workshop. I haven't had customers yet, but I know everything has its time. Remember, you taught that life can take everything from us, except hope. When rereading his own words, he smiled. Yes, he believed it. Tomorrow would be different. He just didn't know that the first client would come unexpectedly. The next morning, as he swept the entrance of the workshop, he heard a strange noise. He looked at the street and saw an old car releasing smoke in the middle of the avenue. The driver, a gentleman with grey hair, came out desperate, shaking his smoke with his hands. Lucas did not think twice. "Need help, sir?" he shouted, already running toward the vehicle. The man looked at him suspiciously. "My car died out of nowhere. Let me take a look." The driver hesitated. He had never seen that young man before. But without many options, he stepped back and let Lucas open the hood. With agile hands, Lucas analyzed the engine. The smell of burnt oil indicated overheating. He took a cloth, checked some connections, and found the problem. A loose hose was spilling water from the radiator. "Your car just needs a quick adjustment, sir. I have a workshop right next door. I can solve it in less than an hour." The old man scratched his beard. "How much will it cost me?" "You can pay what you think is fair." The man arched his eyebrow, intrigued. "Let's see if you're really good." Lucas pushed the car to the workshop and started working. Half an hour later, the engine snored again, firm and stable. The customer was impressed. "Malek, you know what you're doing." He took some notes from his pocket and handed them to Lucas. "I'm going to spread your name around. You deserve it." And so, with a simple repair and an act of generosity, Lucas got his first client. But he still didn't know that that little gesture would change everything. In the following days, a car stopped in front of the workshop, then another, and another. The lord of the first repair really spread the word, and now residents of the region began to look for Luke, not because he had a large workshop, but because he worked well and charged fair prices. "I heard you solve any engine problem," they said. "My neighbor said you are honest. Can you take a look at my car?" Lucas served each client as if it were the first. He explained every detail, showed where the problem was, and whenever possible he taught minor maintenance to avoid further defects. This generated something that money could not buy: trust. The workshop began to grow. Little by little, Lucas managed to buy more tools, hired a helper, installed a simple but significant sign: "Lucas Workshop. Here we fixed honesty." The months passed, and what was once an abandoned shed became a point of reference in the region. But Lucas didn't want to stop there. Over time, he managed to rent a larger space. The new workshop had more structure, more equipment, more mechanical. He implemented an efficient system based on the preventive maintenance technique he had created when he worked with his Antonio. Customers loved it. People started to trust him not only for emergency repairs, but to ensure that their cars were always in good condition. This generated return fidelity. In less than 2 years, Lucas opened 2 more branches. He, the boy who was once humiliated and rejected, now owned one of the most respected business in the city. But there was still something missing. He needed to go home. One afternoon, after a day full of work, Lucas looked at a letter that his mother had sent days before. "Son, the village is still the same. Time goes slowly here, but I miss you every day." He took a deep breath. He had spent so much time running after his dreams that he had not realized how much he missed. The following week, he bought a bus ticket and left for his homeland. The road looked smaller than he remembered. Coffee plantations still stretched through the horizon. But your mother's house? Ah, the house. When he got off the bus and walked down the dirt road, he saw Donna Maria's silhouette on the porch. The flowered apron was still there, the same tired smile, the same look full of love. She said nothing, just opened her arms. Lucas ran to her and hugged her hard. The smell of coffee and herbs took over his senses. He was at home. In the days that followed, Lucas enjoyed every moment with his mother. He took groceries, reformed the roof of the house, fixed the old furniture. "Now you can rest, mother. No more work so much." Donna Maria laughed, swinging her head. "Rest? And who will take care of my chickens?" Lucas smiled. He knew his mother would never stop being that strong and simple woman. Last night, before returning to town, he and Donna Maria sat on the porch, having coffee. "Remember when I said I was going to buy a bag of sugar just for us?" asked Lucas, laughing. Donna Maria looked at him with love. "I remember, yes." He pulled a big bag of the bag beside him and put it on the table. Promise fulfilled. The two laughed, but deep down they knew that promise was symbolic. The real promise Lucas had made was to give a better life to his mother. And now, finally, he had succeeded. The red ground of the dirt road lifted dust with every firm step that Lucas took. He felt the hot wind hitting his face, carrying the unmistakable smell of the coffee plantations that marked his childhood. It had been years ago. I hadn't traveled those roads as I did when it was a boy. But now he was no longer the thin boy with thin clothes who asked for work. Now Lucas was a man made, and I was there to face the past. It all started that morning when he had coffee next to Donna Maria. "Did you sleep well?" he asked as he blew the steaming cup. "Better than in recent years. Now that I know you're okay." Lucas smiled. There was something magical to be there, in the simplicity of maternal home, far from the rush of the big city. But the tranquility was short-lived. Aunt Joanna, a firm, rushed lady, entered the door without ceremony, holding a wrinkled newspaper. "Lucas, you won't believe what they are saying in the village." He arched his eyebrows. What there was? She sat at the table, throwing the newspaper in front of him. "The Sol Farm is for sale." The name hit his chest like a punch. Sol Farm. The place where he was humiliated. The place where they said he would never be anything. He swallowed dry, taking the newspaper. There, among the classifieds, the announcement was clear. "Sol Farm, urgent sale. Treat directly with the owner." Lucas felt his heart accelerate. The fate was calling. The question was, would he answer? That night, Lucas could not sleep. Sitting on the porch, he looked at the stars, smelling the coffee that still hung in the air. What do I get back there? The memory of humiliation was still vivid. The manager's face, his eyes of contempt, the laughter of the workers. Everything came back like a movie in your mind, but he didn't feel hatred. I felt something stronger, the desire to change that story. He took a handful of dry soil between his fingers, letting the grains run slowly. I was rejected here, but now I can transform this place. The next morning, he found Donna Maria in the backyard, reaping herbs to tea. "Mom, I'm thinking of buying the Sol Farm." She stopped what she was doing, taking a deep breath before turning to him. "And why, my son?" Lucas rubbed the back of his neck, thinking of the best answer. Because one day they said I didn't belong to that place. I want to prove that they were wrong." Donna Maria sighed, crossing her arms. "To prove to whom? For you or for them?" The question took Lucas by surprise. He was silent for a moment, so he smiled. "I think for me, Mom." She nodded. "Then go, but go with a clean heart. Don't let the past poison your gift." Lucas hugged her, and at that moment, he decided he would buy the Soul Farm. Days later, Lucas returned to the farm, but not as a buyer. He dressed in the same simple clothes of his youth, took an old hat, dirty his hands from dirt, and mixed with the workers. No one recognized him, but he recognized everything. The fields were still vast, but the farm was decaying. The structure was worn out, the workers looked tired, and the air carried an invisible weight. And then he saw the manager, the same man who humbled him years ago, now older, with gray hair, but still with the same arrogant look. Lucas took a deep breath. We'll see if time has changed anything. The manager walked the countryside, giving harsh orders to the workers. Seeing him, Lucas felt the same cold in the spine he had felt as a teenager, but now he was another man. The manager stopped by his side without recognizing him. "Who are you?" Lucas lifted his head, looking at him in his eyes. "Just one more looking for work." The manager snorted, crossing his arms. "If you want to weed, you can stay, but don't expect anything beyond that." Lucas smiled in the corner. The story was about to rewrite itself. The next day, an announcement toured the farm. All workers must meet in the courtyard at dawn. When the sun was born, Lucas walked to the center of the courtyard, now wearing clean clothes and firm posture. The manager was there, alongside the workers, with his usual arrogance. Lucas cleared his throat and calmly said, "I have something important to announce." Everyone shut up. He took a deep breath, letting the moment last. So looking straight at the manager, he said the words that would change everything. "My name is Lucas, and I'm the new owner of the Soul Farm." The silence was absolute. The workers looked at each other, confused. The manager was pale, his frozen expression in time. "What?" His voice came out trembling. Lucas stepped forward, crossing his arms. "Yes, I came back, and now this farm belongs to me." The impact was overwhelming. The workers murmured with each other, trying to understand what was happening. The manager staggered a step back, his face taken by unbelief. That can't be true." Lucas just smiled. "But it is." The silence that followed was so heavy that it seemed that the wind itself held its breath. The workers looked at each other, confused, trying to sue what they had just heard. Lucas, the same Lucas who was years ago humiliated in that exact courtyard, the boy the manager downgraded before all, was now there, standing owner of everything. The manager's blood seemed to flee his face. His mouth opened once, then another, as if he tried to say something but no word came out. He blinked several times, unable to believe in the scene before him. That can't be true." The voice came out trembling, loaded with unbelief. Lucas took a step forward. "But it is." The impact of those words was like a blow to the manager's stomach. He staggered lightly, his eyes moving from side to side, seeking an exit, an explanation, anything that could undo that reality that crushed him. But there was no escape. The truth was before him, and it was undeniable. Lucas now was the owner of the Soul Farm, and the manager was just a man before his own past. The manager tried to recover the composure. He straightened his shoulders, forced a smile, but his eyes cheated on him. "So, you came back?" he said, his voice forcibly casual. Lucas did not answer immediately, looked around, analyzing every detail of the farm. The silence in the farm courtyard was almost palpable. All eyes were fixed on Luke, which remained firmly standing with a serene expression. The manager, once arrogant, now seemed diminished, as if the weight of his own actions finally reached him. He swallowed hard, trying to find words, but nothing left. Lucas took another step ahead, looking straight at the man who had once humiliated him. "I didn't go back to take revenge," he said, his calm but authority voice. "I came back to transform this place, to show that everyone, regardless of where they come, deserve a chance." The manager lowered his head, unable to support Lucas's gaze. He knew that his words of contempt, his cruel actions had been wrong. And now, before that man he had so much underestimated, he felt the weight of his own arrogance. Lucas turned to the workers, many of them with expressions of surprise and hope. From today, the Soul Farm will be a place where everyone will be treated with respect, where hard work will be valued, and where everyone will have the opportunity to grow. The workers began to murmur, some with shy smiles, some with tears in their eyes. They knew this was a new era for the farm, and for them. The manager, still in silence, finally raised his head. "What will happen to me?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. Lucas looked at him for a moment, considering. "You can stay if you want, but you will have to learn to work with me, not against me. And you will have to treat them all here with the respect they deserve." The manager nodded slowly, speechless. He knew that was his second chance. And for the first time in years, he felt a weight be taken from his shoulders. In the following months, the Soul Farm flourished like never before. Lucas implemented changes that benefited not only production, but also workers. He created training programs, improved working conditions, and assured that everyone had a voice. The farm has become an example in the region, and Lucas, an admired leader, Donna Maria proudly traveled regularly to visit her son. She sat on the porch of the big house, watching the fields that once were the scene of so much pain, and now they were a symbol of hope and renewal. And then, on a starry night, Lucas and Elisa, now married and waiting for her first child, sat on the porch of the farm. She leaned her head on his shoulder as he ran his hand gently over her belly. "You got, Lucas," said Elisa with a smile. "You have transformed everything." He looked at her, her eyes full of gratitude. "It wasn't just me. It was you, my mother, everyone who believed in me. And now, with you and our son, I know the best is yet to come." And so, under the starry sky, Luke finally found the peace he had sought so much. He had transformed not only the farm, but himself. And in doing so, he proved that the real success is not to overthrow others, but to build a future where everyone can grow together. End.